Thank you very much for that introduction. It is a pleasure to be here. It is not an easy journey getting here from Uganda, but what I've already learned is well worth that journey, believe me. I'm going to talk about national research and education networks, especially in the education context in Africa, and about some of the things we are trying to do to create a difference on the African continent. We truly believe that we have got the capacity to do this. We cannot leave change to the external environment all the time. We believe that change in Africa is sustainable if we address it ourselves. Just some quick headlines, and many of you probably know this. We did a survey in 2008 and found that this is within Eastern and Southern Africa. Our members were spending $1.2 million per month for less than 700 megabits per second. It's a staggering sum of money, because that same amount of money at the same time anywhere else in the world would have procured 60 gigabits per second. Within the last 3 years, bandwidth has gone up to 12 gigabits per second in this region. Most of that is admitted to South Africa. Kenya takes about almost 1 gigabit at the moment, but the change is coming and is coming fast. The point is, there is no extra cost in achieving this. It is simply changes in the environment. And this is what we are trying to achieve so that we can create these changes. We are driven by the desire to develop Africa. We believe that the intellectual potential of Africa is suppressed because African researchers and educators are isolated. And we're talking about total isolation. We're talking about young, fresh graduates getting home and find that they are totally isolated from their peers. We have been through it ourselves. You come home, you're excited, you want to do research, and all of a sudden you cannot access anybody else around the world. And eventually, of course, you start doing other things. And therefore, we want to create equality, not just equity, but equality for African-based researchers and academics so that they can then participate in the global intellectual discourse. We want to reduce the intellectual property deficit of this continent. I believe Professor Kiyamba talked about Kenya. That situation obtains across Africa. It's not because of inability, because these same researchers in other environments perform extremely well. But within the African environment, they are disabled by factors beyond their control. Now, we don't claim that connectivity is an entire solution. There's much more to it than that. But we believe that proper connectivity, access to collaborators, access to peers, access to online resources is a key part of this ability. We believe that we have indeed got the potential by creating this environment and combining it with the rich African climate and culture, we can start a reversal in the brain drain. Maybe not stop it totally, because at the end of the day, the world must live in a dynamic balance. Our name comes from our cultural philosophy. People from Eastern Africa, all the way down to South Africa, know what Ubuntu means. It's really a philosophy of life stating that we are mutually responsible for each other. And that responsibility does not stop in simple community activities. It extends into research and education networking. And so what we have done is start by creating a human network that reaches out to each other across the region, giving help where it is needed. We have seen high-level experts traveling across the region at no pay at all to help their colleagues. We've got people from South Africa helping Kenya. That was about 4 years ago. People from Kenya now helping Uganda and Tanzania, and therefore it keeps on multiplying because I've now got that human network. National research and education networks might not be familiar to all of us, but they're a very important aspect of the education delivery system. In the more developed countries, they are taken for granted. Giant, the region one in Europe, Canary in Canada, Internet 2, National Lambda Rail, Clara in South America, TAIN in Far East, and so on. These enable dedicated connectivity among research and education institutions. In Africa in particular, we're advocating, and our membership has agreed, that this reach must extend down to primary and secondary schools, because we cannot create capacity at the top end when we don't have capacity at the low end. And therefore, our responsibility reaches all levels of education. That is our objective. We believe that these are driven by the human layer at the top, where the real collaboration occurs. But below that, we must have the infrastructure which enables sharing applications and platforms. My colleague has just been talking about that. This is what enables collaboration in teaching, in research, in administration. It enables advanced research which cannot be handled by the private sector. quite often there's a mistake that NRENs come in to supplant the private sector. They don't. They come in to fill a niche which the private sector cannot fill. For example, if you want access to the data being generated in SAN, if you want to access the data coming out of the large arrays in South Africa, you need this dedicated bandwidth. If you want to apply grid computing, you need this kind of connectivity. The growth of NRENs in Africa really started about 5 years ago, I would say, and the alliance shown in blue is currently the most advanced, but we have been working with our colleagues in Western Africa, and the Western Central African Research and Education Network was launched about 9 months ago. We are happy to hear about the launch of ASREN, the Arab States Research and Education Network, about 6 months ago. Granted, they do face challenges at the moment because of their changes, political, social changes around the region, but we believe that, together with Rakun and us, are the key to the final total connectivity of research and education in Africa. What we have been doing over those years first was to stimulate awareness and then create this human network so that people can start appreciating that research and education networking is not simply about universities, but it's about national development, engaging policymakers so that they can pass the kind of message that Professor Kiamba was passing about Kenneth. I must say that I'm personally proud of Kenya because it's one of the countries that get a total integration in the approach to ICT. It's like an elephant. You cannot simply address ICT in education. You must address it in other sectors of the country if you are really going to create a difference. And that type of involvement has been wonderful in Kenya. We engage external stakeholders, but especially we are rolling out a regional network. Our vision is that we are going to have the entire region interconnected. We have taken some steps already without external assistance, so there is a lot happening. But you can find that on our website.